So last week we talked about tactics and made suggestions for Donald Trump and the conservative media to use against the left. And sticking to the topic of tactics being used during this election crisis, I wanted to talk about one specific tactic that the Democrats and media in general have been using for a long time. And that is disinformation to sway public perception.
The second mode of media violence we'll now look at involves guiding public opinion and shifting public focus. This can be seen in the way that before the election, when the Biden family scandal came to light, the leftist media turned a blind eye and remained silent. The third phase of media violence has been to self-proclaim the winner and forcibly try to seize power. Despite the ongoing controversy in the general election and the slowing down of the vote count, the leftist media unabashedly declared Biden the winner as early as November 7th. Biden also immediately declared himself the winner. This was done in spite of the fact that the ballot counting was still in progress and that several election lawsuits had already been filed. The media's gross disregard for constitutional procedures, democracy, and the rule of law is essentially a presidential election coup d'etat.
During the first couple weeks after the election, the narrative that the fake media was trying to create is that there is no evidence of fraud. Now that Trump is actually taking to court and suing them, displaying actual evidence that cannot be ignored, they can no longer use that narrative. What they're switching to now is the consensus that everyone doesn't mind the fraud that's happening, and it's not worth the effort, and Trump should concede.
Let's take a look at this from CNN. I want you to see this. Complicit. Trump is Trump. There is nothing new to say about the man, but there is still lots to learn about his enablers. So many people from GOP functionaries, what is that, to Fox News hosts are helping him to undermine democracy by denying the election and attacking reality. So many people are complicit. People like Maria Bartiromo, formerly an acclaimed journalist, known around the world for making CEOs tell the truth. Now she tees up Trump to recite lie after lie. Her Sunday morning call with Trump on Fox News was the first interview since he lost the election. But it wasn't a real interview at all. He wasn't ready to acknowledge that he lost, and neither was she. He displayed delusional weakness. She was complicit, and she's far from the only one. What is the point of this and every other article calling for retribution? They're trying to scare you.
They started spinning the narrative that Donald Trump should just give up, stop being so quote-unquote corrupt and a sore loser, and just forfeit the election to Joe Biden. They started making up narratives that Donald Trump's kids are even telling Donald Trump to concede.
Circle could be breaking apart over his ongoing refusal to accept the results of the 2020 election. According to two inside sources who spoke to CNN on condition of anonymity, his own family, including his wife Melania and son-in-law Jared Kushner, have now urged him to concede defeat after his election loss to Joe Biden.
This story fooled a lot of people, and it turns out none of that was true and they just made that up. Donald Trump and his kids are completely behind the idea that fraud occurred and there should be something done about it.
The fourth mode of media violence has been the insistence that Trump admits defeat and the various media fabrications surrounding this effort. After the election, the leftist media, including CNN, continued to release information from anonymous sources to suggest that Trump was considering admitting defeat, and that his family were persuading Trump to admit defeat. All of these stories were later denied by the parties involved. In fact, those who understand Trump's personality know that he never concedes defeat easily, especially when it comes to defending America's constitutionally enshrined freedoms.
They're also saying that if Donald Trump goes through with this and wins his case, the American people are going to be outraged and riot through the streets, destroying many small businesses in the process. Which is also completely fabricated, because most American people know that fraud occurred, and it's only the radical left, like the Antifa, that are going to be doing the rioting. People won't be upset that the court overturned this election, because most people actually didn't vote for Joe Biden. The number of votes that you see, the record-breaking number of votes that Joe Biden got, that's a completely fabricated illusion. Through fake mail-in ballots and vote counting machines flipping Donald Trump's numbers to Joe Biden, they were able to make it look like Joe Biden got that many votes, but he didn't. Meaning when the media says, oh, the American people are going to be outraged if you go through with this, the American people aren't going to be outraged. Another thing they're trying to say is, oh, you shouldn't support Donald Trump, and then your jobs will see that you voted for Donald Trump. Your future career will be jeopardized because no one will want to hire you. Well, that's not going to happen. It is our constitutional right as Americans to vote for who we want to. They're trying to scare us by saying that our financial well-being will be in danger if we support Trump. Most businesses don't really care who voted for who. They're just making that up completely. Everything that the Democrats are saying is trying to discourage people from supporting Donald Trump, saying that the majority is on the side of Biden. The American people will be outraged if Donald Trump doesn't win. Through these public perception campaigns, they're trying to install a manipulative level of fear into the American people for voting or supporting Donald Trump. Through these public perception campaigns, not only are they trying to instill fear, but they're trying to make it look like the abnormal is normal. For example, most people think that it's normal to be sexually active as a teenager, but through most studies and polls, it turns out that the majority of teenagers are sexually inactive. 53 to 57% of American teenagers have never engaged in sexual activity. Another poll asked people, what percentage of Americans do they think is homosexual? The poll showed average people think that a quarter of America is homosexual, when in reality, the percentage of gay people in America is still below 3%. This manipulation of public perception causes people to believe that it's normal for a teenager to be sexually active, and that it's normal to be gay, when in reality, it's much more uncommon than people would think. They do this to try to normalize that type of behavior. This is the same reason why the Democrats will take weighted polls. The weighted polls will show that more people are voting for Democrat, and that the Democrat candidate are leading in the poll.
Before the general election started, we saw numerous polls released by the leftist media showing Biden leading by a wide margin, sometimes even double-digit margins. However, vote count suggests that the margin between the two candidates is roughly only 3%, not to mention that even this modest 3% margin has been widened by election fraud and vote manipulation. In other words, these media polls were inaccurate. They're commonly termed suppression polls because, as seen with President Trump, they're used as public opinion weapons to attack political opponents with scientific data to displace the public's confidence in them.
This is to discourage Republicans from going out and voting, and this is what they're doing now. They're trying to make it look like the majority of American people want Donald Trump to concede. But the reality is, most teenagers aren't sexually active. Being homosexual is still abnormal. There aren't as many people voting Democrat as you think there are, and most people don't want Donald Trump to concede. This tactic of spinning false narratives, changing public perception, and blatant lies is a very tactic that Satan used in the garden. Like we've said in multiple videos before, this really is the era of empty threats. These empty threats have been going on throughout the entire year, and now they're trying to use that tactic again. Demoralize people from speaking out against the fraud. This was the first tactic that Satan ever used in the garden. An empty threat that made Eve feel like she was missing something, unless she ate the fruit.
The Democrats are just unable to accept the fact that they lost. And what can we learn from history, biblical history, about what they're inclined to do? The more angry they are, the more desperate they are, the more they're going to pull from an old familiar bag of tricks created by Satan. So let's look at what they're likely to try to do. They're likely to try, just as Lucifer tried to scare Eve, as if God was trying to trick her. He was like, no, God didn't tell you everything. He's holding back from you. You'd be like God if you ate the fruit and blah, blah, blah. He made Eve feel something that wasn't real. He made her feel that she needed to act against a threat that wasn't there. Okay? So we know that that's what we're in. We're in a season of empty threats. If Eve had ignored Lucifer, the fall would have never happened, because all he had was empty threats. After she gave him control over human society through the fall, he now had ammunition. So the fact that all they have is empty threats means that Satan is so weakened by the providence of God in these last days that he's got to go back to his first and weakest strategy, which is to just scare responsible people, the children of God, with empty threats. Don't listen to the Democrats. Things are not as bad as what they say. Their only hope is that by believing in this fear-mongering, that we will act to correct things that weren't a problem in the first place. And by paying attention too much to them, acting to counterbalance them and this kind of thing, the business of the country is not being advanced.
The divine principle says, Lucifer, who left his proper position due to his excessive desire, and Eve, who wanted to open her eyes and become like God before the time was ripe, formed a common base and began give-and-take action. The power of the unprincipled love generated by their give-and-take action led them to consummate an illicit sexual relationship on the spiritual plane. Satan's first used tactic, he convinced Eve that God was withholding something and she needed it, saying, if you eat the fruit, you will become like God. And through her give and take with Satan and his false narrative, Eve committed the fall. If it was extended give and take that caused Eve to believe in the archangel and commit the fall, then if Eve simply ceased give and take with the archangel and didn't allow him to corrupt her mind, it's safe to say that the fall probably would have never happened. In this world, many people's opinions are heavily swayed by media and what they consume. If media is able to sway public perception, cause people to fear what isn't really there, and create empty threats, just like with Satan tempting Eve, it required Eve's give and take for him to do so. We need to stop the give and take between us, the American people, and the media outlets. Don't believe them. When you get the chance, you need to strip them of the power to screw with our minds. We need to prosecute them for defamation and boycott them. If we cease give and take with the archangel, then he will be powerless. Cast him into a bottomless pit. We see through the lies of the fake news and media. Donald Trump will win.